Hi there, Ernie here. So, I want to let you know this is my spoiler review for Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This is full disclosure. Everything that'll come to mind will drop. So if you haven't seen Star Wars The Force Awakens yet, stop now. If you'd like to know my first impressions of Star Wars The Force Awakens in a non-spoiler review, then click the button right here. And that'll take you right to my non-spoiler review and give you my first impressions of the film. But for this video here, I'm just going to lay it all out and finally get everything off my chest. So I'll give you a few moments to click that button and make like a womp rat and get out of here. So, yeah. How about those bears? Well, I'm guessing since you're still here, you must have seen The Force Awakens and been amongst those millions upon millions upon millions of people who went to see this. I can't even say this weekend. Just saw it yesterday. $120 million in opening day. It's pretty damn impressive. Something no one's ever seen. A day long remembered. In my non-spoiler review, I gave Force Awakens a 7 out of 10. Basically, my issues were that the film felt, as I was watching it, it felt like it was too much of a nod to the original film, A New Hope. And there were like, whether it be subconsciously or blatantly, I'm like noticing elements. I'm like thinking it's like, and I'm thinking of the movie. Then I'm like, oh wait, that's the cantina scene. This is the scene where 3PO and R2 land on Tatooine, but now it's Poe and Finn landing on Jakku. Other elements like this is the big rescue of the princess, and now here we are on Star Killer Base, going to rescue Rey, and like I said, spoilers. In The New Hope, we lose Ben. Ben is killed by Darth Vader, and now here we lose Han Solo, killed by Ben Solo, who is alias Kylo Ren. So a lot of elements just felt like they were lifted from the original film, and I mentioned in my countdown review for Return of the Jedi that as a 12-year-old kid, I kind of had issue with the fact they were going after the Death Star again. They already did the Death Star. Why do they have to do the Death Star again? And now, here we are with Episode 7, 32 years later, and they're going after a bigger Death Star, Star Killer Base, which is essentially a planet that was converted into a massive weapon. So, that was one of the main things that kind of irked me about the whole movie, was the fact there were just too many elements that made it feel like, instead of being a fresh, new take on Star Wars, while still staying within the Star Wars universe that we all know and love, it still felt like it was just retreading old stuff. Almost to the point where it makes you stop and think that if George Lucas, the creator, had a better writer for the prequels, since that was all original material, that maybe they could have turned out better than they did. Mind you, I still think Revenge of the Sith was the best of the three. And in hindsight, I remember in my non-spoiler review, I gave it a 7 out of 10 and said it was better than the prequels. And then I went back and took a look at my reviews, and it turns out I gave Revenge of the Sith an 8 out of 10. And I stopped to think that, granted, Force Awakens is a better put together film than Revenge of the Sith, but I was more engaged and had more fun in Revenge of the Sith than I did in The Force Awakens. It's basically, I guess you could say, the equivalent of, let's take the Clone Wars. I did not like the Clone Wars movie, but I enjoyed the hell out of the Clone Wars TV series. So, and then I went back and then I watched the Clone Wars movie again and I actually found more enjoyment of it. Now, like I said, I just came back from The Force Awakens, seeing it again. I was able to enjoy it more for what it was, and not so much for what it initially delivered. And for what it was and what it is a entertaining Star Wars film. It's just not in the same level as the original three, and in my opinion, not as enjoyable or engaging as Revenge of the Sith. Basically, the problem is like the characters are great. Rey, Finn, Poe, BB-8, Kylo Ren. They're all great characters, and but one of the problems lies is in the secondary characters, where characters like Captain Phasma and General Hux and Supreme Commander Snoke. It's like we hear about them, we hear their names, and they're underutilized in such an enormous way. Even going beyond the villains, there's Max von Sydow's Lor San Tekka. He's only in it for a few minutes. I was like, when the movie opens and it's like, it's Max von Sydow. This is Max von Sydow. When you have Max von Sydow in your movie, this is going to have to be significant. He's going to have to play a significant character. It's like saying, okay, Max von Sydow is going to play the older Luke Skywalker. It's got to be something like that. But instead, he's only in it for a few minutes, and we never establish just who he is. I mean, maybe, hopefully, we'll have flashbacks in 8 or 9, but it's like they establish the fact that he knows who Princess Leia is, or General Leia Organa is, but he still considers her royalty, and he discusses the importance of family, and he hands over a piece to the puzzle that they need to, which I guess in this terms would be the MacGuffin, and to move the story along. And while I'm watching that, I'm wondering, who is he? Who is he? Could he be Kanan from Star Wars Rebels? Because we still don't know the fate of Kanan in Star Wars Rebels, which is the great animated series airing on Disney XD that takes place in between episode 3 and 4. And I was like, oh, what did that? Or maybe even could be Ezra. I don't know. Wouldn't that be great? But we never find out just who he is, and hey, he's unceremoniously dispatched by Kylo Ren. I'm like, okay, that's it. Well, there you go. Max von Sydow was in a Star Wars movie, but to what degree and to what effect? It's like, he's just a secondary character, basically. And hopefully that's not the case, and there's actually more to him than we were initially shown. And that would be fleshed out in 8 and 9. Or, hell, maybe even side spin-offs or something. But getting back to the original characters, obviously we know that Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill are all back in this one, but to what degree we don't know until you see the movie. But since you're watching the spoiler review, obviously you must have seen the film by now. So we know that Luke Skywalker does not appear until the final minutes of the film, which was kind of expected. You kind of had a feeling that's where the movie was going, especially when word started getting out that the movie is basically about the search for Luke Skywalker. And the opening crawl basically states that Luke has vanished, the First Order has risen from the ashes of the Empire, and is now searching the galaxy to find him and kill him, to destroy the last of the Jedi. And General Leia Organa is trying to find him as well to help bring him back and help her restore peace and justice to the galaxy. So that's basically how the crawl goes. And we do get to see Han Solo and Chewbacca, and in an interesting reintroduction to the franchise. But another major spoiler is, of course, the death of Han Solo. Han Solo is my favorite character of the entire saga, and as a 9-year-old kid, when I saw Empire, I remember being rather perturbed at the fact that they put him in carbonite, and then that was the last we ever saw of him until Return of the Jedi, and I kind of didn't like Empire for that. So for a long time, I considered Empire my least favorite until I got older and understood drama and all that jazz, and I thought that was by far the best film in the series, and still is the best film in the franchise. But oddly enough, since this is a new film, new story, we didn't know where it was going, but his death was pretty well telegraphed, that it had no impact for me. My favorite character, one of my most favorite characters of all time, died. And I felt nothing. Am I that jaded? I don't think so. But it's just the way events unfolded, I felt nothing, because it was like purely telegraphed. I got that I had the vibe that when Han and Leia were talking to each other before he was taking off on the mission, that, yep, he's dead. I mean, I didn't get that impression in going into the movie that Han's going to die. I thought maybe at least he'll make it to episode 8 or something. And the poignancy of Han trying to reach out to his son, Ben Solo, who was Kylo Ren, that moment between father and son just didn't have the same impact as, say, the scene in Return of the Jedi where Luke and Vader are talking about when Luke surrenders and he's talking to Vader on the gangway, and they're just talking about how Luke thinks he can reach Anakin, and Darth Vader says, that person's gone, there's nothing left, it's too late for him. That had a certain resonance because we had that knowledge building up from Empire leading into Jedi. But here we just have to go with the story and like, oh hey, Han and Leia had a kid, and he had Force powers and was trained by Luke, and then went to the dark side, and everything went to hell, and Luke said, I can't do this, and left. And now Ben Solo is now one of the leaders of the First Order and is one of the most deadliest Sith Lords. They don't refer to him as a Sith Lord, but he definitely delves in the dark side in the galaxy. So the way it unfolds, it was just it should have been jaw-dropping, like let's say in The Walking Dead. Sorry if I'm going to drop a big Walking Dead spoiler here, but what can you do? I'm making my point. When Glenn, in this season's Walking Dead, when Glenn died, my jaw dropped during that scene as it was unfolding. I could not believe they were doing this. One, it was totally unexpected. Two, it was being handled in a non-traditional manner when you see a major character from The Walking Dead die. And three, it just happened, then it was just discarded. And then they just moved on. It's like, Glenn just died. Holy shit. I was like, literally watching the screen, I'm like, it's like, couldn't breathe. I'm like, oh my God, this is happening. And I did not get that in the death of Han Solo. Like I said, one of my favorite characters of all time. Not to say that that's the fault of the actors or even JJ. It maybe, or I don't know, it might be a collection of all three, that his directing, the writing, and the actors, that they could have given this moment more weight. I mean, the obvious response from Chewbacca and Leia and Finn and Rey were appropriate, and then again in my mind I'm like thinking, it's like, oh, this is that moment where Ben dies and then Luke sees it happen, then he screams no, and then he just starts blasting away, shooting at everybody. Deja vu. Chewbacca is Luke, and he just saw Han get killed, and now he's just blasting away, killing stormtroopers, and then he blows the whatever the thing was called, the Transformer Station, to hell. So that was probably one of the main issue, is that the emotional weight, I did not feel emotionally connected on my initial viewing. I mean, I like the characters now after the second viewing, because I could just totally focus on the movie and the story. I was like, okay, I get them now. But on my initial viewing, nothing connected. So, but now after seeing it again, my opinion is still the same. It's still a 7 out of 10. But I'm now more honed in and now looking forward to the events of Episode 8 and see what Episode 8 answers in terms of the questions that are raised in Episode 7. Performance-wise, Everybody is pretty good. I mean, I enjoyed the banter between Han Solo and Chewbacca, and Carrie Fisher was great as Leia, and you could definitely see the. But the only thing was that I wasn't 100% convinced that she really believed that they could bring their son back from the dark side. And then we had Mark Hamill, probably for a non-verbal performance, probably delivered one of the best non-verbal performances in the franchise, as basically all he would do was to react to Rey, and Rey with his lightsaber, the very lightsaber that he lost at in his battle with Vader in Cloud City on Bespin in Empire Strikes Back, and you just like see the weight and the in his eyes that he knows that Han, at least I hope he knows. I mean, if Leia felt it, he must have, that Han has died at the hands of his Padawan. So that was a very cool moment. For the new people, Daisy Ridley is fantastic as Rey, a really enjoyable character. John Boyega is also great as Finn and very entertaining. Although his manner of speaking in some scenes is very 21st century and very Earth centric, and not so much galaxy far, far away. No, nonetheless, that's where we got the language from. Who knows? And Oscar Isaac is great as Poe Dameron. Very entertaining and an enjoyable character. Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren in many ways reminds me of the whiny, bitchy Anakin that we all started to hate, and this is kind of like the progression of where that character would have ended up being if he was continuing on his route as a whiny, bitchy Sith Lord. And that's kind of like what Ben Solo / Kylo Ren comes off as. He's very powerful. Obviously, he's very impatient, and he lashes out quite often. But those lashing out makes him come off as like a whiny bitch. I mean, what else is there to say? And that moment between Ben Solo and Han Solo, just like I said, lacked emotional weight. This should be like. Should have been like, what's his name? Fugitive, Harrison Ford in The Fugitive. Richard Kimball. Coming across the one-armed man, the man who killed his wife. Should have been like something like that. But it wasn't. But as a villain, I think Kylo Ren, Ben Solo could be developed into a solid villain for Episode 8, depending on where they take him and where the characters go. I mentioned earlier that the underutilized use of a lot of the characters, including Hux and Phasma in particular. Big deal was made about Domhnall Gleeson playing General Hux and Gwendolyn Christie playing Captain Phasma, but they're barely in it. Hux in particular, not Hux, Phasma in particular is like only maybe 3 scenes, and doesn't really come off as like all that big a deal outside of being a cool looking stormtrooper and also happens to be a woman. But it didn't leave much of an impact. It's almost like she's just a shiny trophy head for the First Order to make them stand out as to who the leader is. And Hux kind of just turns out just to be some dude barking orders most of the time. And I mean, you can get the relationship between Hux and Ren is coming off just as bickering leaders. Like what if Grand Moff Tarkin and Darth Vader are always at odds with each other because it's like, no, yeah, you did this, and like, no, you did this. It's like, I told you to do it this way, and you did it this way, stuff like that. But now to the story itself, like I said, just felt too much like deja vu from the original. So that was one of the issues that I had, and that's something that kind of took me out of the movie from time to time. But since after seeing it the second time and knowing what it is and what to expect, it didn't bother me as much as initially did, and I actually kind of enjoyed the movie a little bit more. But the story is good, and it really sets up events for 8 and 9 for wherever the rest of the trilogy is going to go. It sets up the characters quite well, sets up the universe, leaves the questions that need to be answered, and now I'm ready to go for episode 8, which thankfully is only a year and a half away versus 3 years. So hopefully a lot of the questions that were left in 7 will be answered and answered satisfactorily. And hopefully this doesn't end up being like a retread of Empire Strikes Back, because if a lot of people remember from Abrams' work in the Star Trek universe, Star Trek Into Darkness was essentially a reboot of The Wrath of Khan, but I loved Into Darkness. I thought it was one of the best ones, so go figure. So now we have episode 8 around the corner, then episode 9, and then Rogue One, the Han Solo standalone film. But as for episode 7, it is a worthy addition to the Star Wars saga. It's just not as great as the original trilogy, and while it's a much better put together film, it wasn't as engaging or as fun as episode 3, in my opinion. Sure, it's for general audiences that aren't too demanding. It's probably just a great popcorn epic to just find great enjoyment in and a lot of fun. And the audience that I saw it in for the second time, they were just having a ball. And maybe that had an impact on my enjoyment of the film being a little bit better than the first time I saw it. But I don't know. But episode 7, as I said, I would give a 7 out of 10. It's I highly appreciated the fact that Abrams used a lot of practical effects and a fair amount of CGI where needed. I mean, obviously they had to use CGI for characters like Lupita Nyong'o's Maz Kanata and Supreme Leader Snoke by Andy Serkis, and they were. Whereas Snoke was a hologram, so that did look a bit CGI-ish, but that was a hologram. But Maz did look really good for a CGI character, and was an interesting character. And the cantina scene, while obviously trying to be reminiscent of the original cantina scene, the cantina scene is full of what clearly looks like practical makeup creatures. And there's some in there just like, in the old days they would just be CG, but they're actually real physical creatures in there, and it's stuff like that I love. And the locations that Abrams shot in, it just looked great. Like the location of Maz's castle, the snow forest where most of the fight takes place on Starkiller Base, and what else? Obviously the Tatooine locations. Jakku locations. And the final, I think it was the Isle of Man, I believe what it's called, in the somewhere around Scotland or Ireland, I believe, is where they shot and shoot. I believe that's where they're shooting right now for episode 8. The location of where Luke Skywalker's been hiding out, as Han mentions, that's probably the site of the first Jedi Temple, and that's where we leave off with Daisy Ridley and Mark Hamill standing there on top of the mountain as Rey holds Luke's lightsaber from Empire before him, and he has yet to reach out and take it. So, in terms of canon, I don't know the canon on the novels too well. I remember that Han and Leia did have kids, and one of them did turn to the dark side. I don't know if his name was Ben or not, and I knew that Luke Skywalker had kids. But as to what happened to them, I don't know or don't remember. So there's many questions like, is Rey related to Luke? And how does Rey know all these Force tricks without anyone ever showing her in the movie? Like, she's able to use the Jedi mind tricks. I'm like, no one ever showed her how to do that. unless she was well versed in her reading up on it, no, and because she thought Luke was a myth and a legend, so maybe she read up on Jedi lore. I don't know. So there's a lot of questions like that I'm sure they'll answer in the next ones. But The Force Awakens is a solid launch to a new trilogy and a solid launch to a new set of characters and world that many people are just going to be totally invested in and can't wait to go back to again and again. As for me, I'll probably end up seeing it at least one or two more times. I remember that I ended up seeing Phantom Menace like 5 times before it dawned on me that this movie isn't really that good. But The Force Awakens is nothing like that. The Force Awakens is actually a solid, for me, a decent solid Star Wars film that's worthy of multiple viewings. I mean, even if it's on Spike TV, I might watch like a little bit of Attack of the Clones or something if it's on, and if it's like Revenge of the Sith, sure, I'll watch it. But yeah, The Force Awakens is definitely a one to watch multiple times, good or bad. It's Star Wars, so a lot of people said this felt like Star Wars, and it looked like Star Wars, and they had a lot of fun with it. For me, it does have that look and feel of Star Wars, but it just felt a little derivative for Star Wars because it kept on utilizing the same things that were done before. So hopefully they bring something fresh and new with Episode 8 and have their Empire Strikes Back, which is such a fresh and exciting sci-fi adventure and sequel. So there you have it. That's my spoiler review for the most anticipated movie of century, I guess you could say. And I gave that a 7 out of 10. It's right in the middle of the franchises for me. For the best being 5, 4, 6, and then 7, and then 3, 2, 1 to round it out. So what say you? Have you? I'm hoping that if you're here watching this, that you have seen The Force Awakens. What did you like about it? What did you not like about it? What were your feelings about the major events that occurred in the film, how they unfolded or presented in the film? I'd be curious to know, and post in the comments below. If you like this spoiler review, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already subscribed to my channel, please do, so you can stay on top of my reviews as they come in. So, until the next time you see The Force Awakens, may the Force be with you.